Minato Namikaze was one of the greatest shinobi to ever live, and was definitely worthy of the status of Hokage. And so, to make it better, I decided to give him a Sharingan. Alright, sure, Sasuke's father died prematurely, but at least he doesn't lose his clan. Minato kept that Sharingan in memory of his friend, but even with this new eye, Minato could not yet see the truth. He was indeed a Senju, but this fact was hidden from him. His true mother was Tsunade. That's a popular theory within the Naruto community, and when you look at Tsunade and Dan together, you can understand why. So, in the midst of his despair, being the Hokage, being a single father, having never known his parents, Minato has finally found an anchor with which to cement his heritage, and Naruto has gained a strong woman in his life to help fill the hole left behind by Kushina. But while good things come, dark clouds have been ever rising on the horizon, and the time for a final confrontation that will change the world is on its way. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Minato was resting. A hard day's work always tuckered him out, and the sad thing was, every day's work was a hard day's work. Well, not every day. He had a lot of free time now since Tsunade had returned, but even so, he was still bushed. There had been a time when he missed having Kushina beside him and couldn't sleep, but these days those pains had completely vanished, and to a point even, Minato felt a new pain from that. A pain called guilt. He didn't want to normalize the loss of Kushina, but it was natural, and time healed all wounds, even if you didn't want it to. Minato wanted to never be the same. He wanted to say that he could never survive without her, but he currently was, and he hated that. Worst of all, he could barely feel it anymore. It was so ironic. Minato often found himself crying not because she wasn't there, but because even though she wasn't there, he didn't feel sad anymore. Essentially, he was starting to get happy again, and he didn't like that. He should never be happy again, he thought. But as if the spirit of his wife appeared by him to lull him to sleep, he was reminded that it was okay to be happy. She would want him to be happy, and he had so many things to be happy about. He had a son who was happy, healthy, and growing into a respectable man. And now, more recently, he had time all to himself with which to work efficiently and not strain himself juggling his responsibilities. He was finally getting help. That was thanks to Tsunade, who had been revealed to be his mother. He had a son and a mother, a dream job and a purpose. Why wouldn't he be happy? He should be. It would be a disservice to himself and to Kushina's memory not to allow himself to be happy. He supposed that he felt this way because he feared that, should time heal the wound, that he might begin to forget about her. And that pain was as bad as having lost her in the first place. Minato was no psychologist, and he had not talked to one. Shinobi were proud people, and they refused to admit when they needed to stop and check on themselves. In a world like this, it paid to check in on your mental health. And though he had resisted the idea, Naruto had noticed his expressions and reactions, as had Tsunade, both of which implored him to maybe talk to someone about this. But who? Who could he talk to that was old and wise enough to understand the plights he might have? "Why don't you tell me about it?" the deep voice grumbled. Minato sat on the floor. The floor was covered in reflective water. Despite that, his clothes were not getting wet. He just guessed that this was how the mind worked. Minato looked up at Kurama's dark coat sitting inside the remains of the cage. There were no bars holding him in, but all the same he was sitting there. It seemed he had grown accustomed to that space and had made it his own personal home, despite being free to travel anywhere throughout Minato's mindscape. "I lost Kushina, you know, and that hurt." "I am very sorry about that," Kurama said. "I know I'm responsible for it." The truth was, Kurama had been, but Minato didn't come here to play the blame game. No, not exactly. We weren't on good terms back then, and you weren't in control when it happened. As far as I can tell, you had very little to do with it, and even if you did, I can't blame you for wanting out. It's only natural after the kind of life you lived. Kurama groaned a bit. "It was a bad situation all around, and as my mind has been changed by you and open to the possibilities of humanity and the kindness within them, I can at least say wholeheartedly that if I could go back, I would have done anything in my power to keep Kushina alive." Minato almost shed a tear over that. "You miss her, don't you?" Kurama asked. Minato looked up. That's the thing. I don't. Kurama's head turned to the side. "What do you mean?" Minato looked up. "When she was with me, I was happier than I had ever been. And when she died, I felt like I died too, like a corpse, going through the motions of life out of obligation. But now, I don't feel like that. You're moving on. Time is healing. Minato shook his head. I don't want to move on, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. Kurama by this time was listening intently. Minato, what is it? Minato sniffed a bit. I don't want to be happy. I want to go back to being a walking corpse, because so long as I felt the pain of her being gone, I felt her at all, Kurama said. Minato's eyes overran with tears, though his expression didn't change. I don't want to forget her. Kurama had nothing he could really say to make this pain go away, but he planned to talk with him further, hopefully helping him at least organize his thoughts and feelings into something manageable. You know, when I was younger, I knew the Sage of Six Paths. He created me. I viewed that man as a father. For years, I protected mankind from itself in his honor. But I was continually disappointed, and that led me to resenting the very people I was tasked with protecting. When he was dying, I felt the pain in my heart, the same as you do. It was the first time I had ever shed tears. We all did, all 9 of us. I know what it's like to have lost someone you cherished. Minato, you're afraid of losing the pain because the pain reminds you of her. It was the last thing you felt with her, and if the pain goes away, you'll fear that you won't be able to feel her anymore. You're holding on to your pain because you're holding on to her, but you need to let her go. The fight you're going through now is inside of you. The fact that you're feeling happy again, that's your heart telling you that it's finally ready to move on. But I don't want to move on. I feel like if I do, I'll be abandoning her, throwing her away like she never mattered. Kurama gave off a chuckle and a laugh. In truth, this chuckle and laugh weren't real. There was a lump in Kurama's throat, and the desire to cry was ever present, just behind his eyes. But this laugh was designed to be a jovial way of telling Minato that he was being silly. Minato, you're never going to abandon her. You and she are a single person. Just as a piece of you died with her, a piece of her lives on in you, and a piece of you each came together to form who Naruto is. Your son is her legacy. Minato heard these words. His shoulders began to tremble as his eyes, overrunning with tears, began to squint as his heart spilled out in the ugliest fashion. Tears so ugly were yet beautiful in Kurama's eyes. It was proof of heart. Pain was proof of life. It was because we knew pain that we could know love. Without contrast, we could not see the picture clearly. Because you were hurt, you knew how to help others heal. People tended to fall into themselves and never stopped to realize that your pain might not be a punishment, but a lesson. When you understood someone's heart, then you had the license to heal. Minato, right now, was starting to figure that out, and despite his age, he was still a child in Kurama's eyes. Kurama was over 1,000 years old and had seen many things. Minato was 40 by this time, but he might as well have only been months old compared to Kurama. Learning was something one did throughout their whole life. As Minato cried, Kurama did the only thing he could and continued to comfort him. The next day, Minato was doing his work. Frankly, Kurama had helped him to feel a little bit better about the situation, so he was more happy today than usual, and trying not to fetter his joy with guilt over something that he both could not control nor was expected to. He was looking over various documents, reading them and signing off on some, disregarding others, etc. But it was then that Itachi walked into the office. Pardon the intrusion, Lord Forth, but we have an urgent report that you need to read. Minato sat the papers he was holding down and took the new report. Gaara. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a while. Minato thought back to the Chunin exams in which Gaara had teamed up with Orochimaru against the Leaf under Rasa's orders. But frankly, that was water under the bridge, as the attack was unsuccessful and there were no real casualties due to the quick and efficient work of Konoha's finest. As it stood, however, Orochimaru had betrayed the Sand and killed their Kazekage, Gaara's father. After being captured, Naruto had spent time talking with him, Jinchuriki to Jinchuriki. Minato himself had spoken with Gaara on various occasions, telling him that his future was determined by his own self-worth, not by what others believed of him. It seemed this had stuck, and when Gaara was released back to the Sand, the first thing he did was become Kazekage in his father's stead and begin to devote resources to helping Konoha locate and bring Orochimaru to justice. And while both Tsunade and Konoha hated working together, they swallowed their pain for a chance to take out a common foe. It was through this peace offering that Konoha and Suna offered another joint Chunin exams, one that would take place in the Sand. Minato agreed to this as to give Suna its leadership a chance to make nice. They all knew that Konoha would stomp Suna. The whole reason why Suna attacked Konoha in the first place was to knock them down a peg and give Suna a chance to make more money to stay afloat. And even with both the help of Orochimaru and the element of surprise, Suna had failed to actually put a dent in Konoha. As Minato read over the report, he half expected to see that it said that they knew where to find Orochimaru, but instead he was shocked to find that it said Gaara was abducted. He read through the reports of men in black cloaks with red clouds and immediately knew who this was. The Akatsuki. They had a reputation, and many who were in the know knew who they were. Minato was one of those people. He would proceed to pull up Team Kakashi and Team Guy and send them to Suna to ascertain the last known location of the 5th Kazekage and the possible places where he could have gone. And so he called Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi to him and briefed them on the situation before giving them details and objectives to accomplish. Once this was pounded out, he would send them out on an assignment. After this, he would call in Rock Lee, Tenten, and Neji Hyuga along with their mentor Might Guy and inform them the same, ordering them to provide backup and support for the mission. He then sent them out. He stood and looked out the window toward the village. Not long after, Jiraiya walked in. "You sent for me?" Minato nodded. "Yes, it's the Akatsuki. They've made a move against Gaara of the Hidden Sand. I get the feeling that this is going to be a very bad situation soon, but I need you on standby." Jiraiya nodded. "Of course." And with that, Minato was left to continue his paperwork for the time being. A few days passed before the two teams returned. They came to Minato in his office, where they told him of what they had learned. About how Gaara had his tailed beast taken away from him and would have died if not for the jutsu that allowed Chiyo to sacrifice her life for Gaara's. Minato noticed that the Akatsuki had seized a tailed beast. Now, to show how very dangerous and important this is to the Leaf, what this is equivalent to would be a real-world nuclear weapon being taken from a real-world superpower and held by a terrorist organization, which the Akatsuki technically are. And so he begins to spread this information among the other great shinobi villages that their Jinchuriki could be targets. Of course, the other village leaders don't seem to have much faith in the Akatsuki's abilities to hit them. After all, what are a couple rogue shinobi gonna do to villages as great as Kumo? Minato warned them not to underestimate the Akatsuki or their abilities, but it seemed that his pleas fell on deaf ears. There was nothing he could do. He delivered a message and stressed its importance. It was up to the other nations now to protect their assets. After this, however, Minato was informed by Sakura that one of the Akatsuki members, Sasori, was intended to meet with Orochimaru, and that said Akatsuki member leaked the location before his death. Minato grew excited. This was their chance to find and eliminate Orochimaru for his hand in attacking Konoha, and to bring him to justice for the many inhumane experiments that took place in Konoha years earlier. And so Minato put together a group of his greatest Anbu agents, ranging from Kakashi to Itachi, as well as Yamato. Other Anbu agents wouldn't be too far behind, and so the group went to Tenchi Bridge where they'd planned to meet with Kabuto, one of Orochimaru's underlings. As they got there, using Yamato as bait disguised as Sasori, Orochimaru appeared. To their shock though, Orochimaru attacked Yamato. Yamato got out of the way. His cover blown, he took his true form, which only confused Orochimaru. Suddenly, Minato, Kakashi, and Itachi came rushing out of the trees. Minato would immediately attack Orochimaru. The first thing Minato did was remove his eye patch to display his Mangekyo Sharingan. Orochimaru saw it and laughed. "So it seems that you possess the Sharingan. It looks like I wasn't the only one to go to any lengths to obtain power." Minato sneered. "Shut up, I'm nothing like you." Minato would attack Orochimaru, striking out at him with incredible speed. Orochimaru managed to deflect these attacks fairly easily. Itachi would come through as well and attack him. Yamato was going to go after Kabuto. Together, facing Itachi and Minato, Orochimaru was just not a match. Kakashi didn't even really have to join in, but he did anyway, just to cement the fact that they were going to capture Orochimaru. Orochimaru was defeated and taken into custody. It wasn't long after that Yamato returned. However, he had bad news in that Kabuto had managed to escape. That sucked, but they got who they really came for. So for Minato, this was a plus. They would return to Konoha together, where they would throw Orochimaru up under the jail to let him rot until they could decide what to do with him. Minato felt a weight off his shoulders with the capture of Orochimaru, but this didn't last long as the threat of Akatsuki was slowly rising. The world was not going to deal with the Akatsuki themselves, and so Minato was going to have to step up. After hearing a supposed bounty taken by Hidan and Kakazu, Minato authorized that a mission be spun up over it. They sent certain groups out after the Akatsuki. It was Minato's hope that they could neutralize the threat and capture at least one of them, bringing them back to Konoha to give up as much information about their group as possible. To that end, he sent many a group out, including one led by Asuma Sarutobi, the son of the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi. During this, Minato also received words of many rumors surrounding the Akatsuki, and would organize with Jiraiya in hopes of sending him to Amagakure. to see if it was truly the home base of the Akatsuki. Jiraiya agreed and proceeded to leave. All the while, Minato told Naruto that he needed to train just in case they needed him, but that was a false statement. He gave Naruto a goal to keep him occupied. The truth of the matter was, if the Akatsuki were gathering up tailed beasts, then more than likely Minato himself and Naruto would be targets. Minato had plenty of guards around him, but Naruto did not, and it was paramount that they take extra precaution not to let their tailed beasts fall into the hands of the Akatsuki. And so, while Naruto trained, Minato kept his eye on the situation. As Minato thought back about it, he recalled that Kushina's death had been caused when a mysterious masked man in a cloak removed the tailed beast from within her. This caused Minato to wonder if the two events could possibly be linked. This caused him to pull the file out on both the One Tail case as well as the Nine Tails case that occurred 16 years earlier. He began searching for any clues as to a possible link. As he did this though, news came in that Hidan and Kakuzu had escaped their capture and had killed Asuma Sarutobi in the process. Minato was shocked to hear that a shinobi of such great skill and renown such as Asuma could be killed. As Minato thought about this, he began to feel as if he underestimated the Akatsuki, and began to wonder what this meant for the rest of the squads he sent out. He sent orders to regroup and brought everyone back to Konoha save a few scouts that were sent out to keep an eye on movements for them. Beyond that, this had put a bad feeling in the pit of Minato's stomach, so he cancelled Jiraiya's mission and bid him to return immediately. They needed to think of a new plan, but before they could do this, there was something Minato had to do. Minato walked into the home that was Hiruzen's. It had been a while since he visited the previous Hokage. Hiruzen often came by the office to spend time with Minato, have lunch, or offer advice on matters that Minato was confused by, but he had rarely gone to Hiruzen's home. Maybe that's because Hiruzen simply wasn't there very often. Hiruzen liked to find any excuse to get out of the house. It was likely that Hiruzen avoided this place because it was so big and reminded him of Biwako. To Hiruzen's credit, he didn't cry when told about Biwako, but he knew it had hurt him. And coming from that same hurt, Minato knew that this was about to open a lot of old scars and cause a brand new one. Minato knocked on the door. Hiruzen would open it. "Oh, Minato, it's been a while since you've come to visit. I certainly hope everything is okay." Uh-oh, Hiruzen already sensed something was wrong. Minato was unable to hide anything from him, and now that the question had caught him off guard, Minato didn't know how to respond. He simply stood there, mouth open, tongue and breath attempting to form words, but his mind not possessing enough information to do more than stutter. Hiruzen looked at him funnily. "Is something wrong, Minato?" Minato finally broke his silence. "Lord Third, Minato, we've come well beyond formalities. Just speak plainly to me." Minato groaned. "Do you remember when I sent groups out after the Akatsuki members that we got intelligence on earlier this week?" Hiruzen nodded. Minato looked down at his clasped hands and piddled his thumbs. "Well, something happened." "What is it?" Hiruzen asked. Minato took a couple of breaths. "Hiruzen, over the course of the mission, Asuma was killed." A heavy silence fell over the room. Hiruzen sat there, processing. "I'm sorry, Minato. Could you please repeat that?" Minato nodded. "During the mission to neutralize and capture the Akatsuki members, Asuma Sarutobi was killed in action." Hiruzen sat there and nodded. "I see. Is that all?" Minato nodded. Hiruzen smiled. "Well then, I plan to get myself something to drink. Would you care for some tea?" Minato shook his head. "No thank you." Hiruzen stood and made his way to the kitchen where a kettle was screaming. He'd go to the counter where he'd begin pouring the tea into his cup. As he did so, Minato couldn't help but feel horrible. He always hated this part of his job. It was never easy for anyone. It always hurt. But to be fair, Hiruzen was taking it better than most. Suddenly, Minato heard shattering glass. He ran into the kitchen to see that Hiruzen had dropped the cup. Its boiling hot contents spilled all over the floor. "Are you okay? Did you hurt yourself?" I broke It was my favorite teacup. Tears began to overflow in his eyes. At first, Minato was confused. Why would the old man cry over his teacup and not over his own wife and son? Then Minato realized that Hiruzen was crying over his family. He had dropped the cup because he couldn't see the counter through his tears. Minato stood upright and took the elderly man and pulled him away from the counter and sat him down in a chair. Hiruzen sat there silently, staring off into space as he gnawed on his fingernails nervously. "Konohamaru was so close with Asuma. He was like the father Kono never had. How am I going to tell him?" Minato was obviously shaken by the situation, but his righteous rage had been kindled, as had the rage of many. Shikamaru Nara and the entirety of Team Asuma were ready to kill, and frankly, Minato was as well. When Naruto heard from Konohamaru what happened, he too was signing up for the mission, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. Screw intelligence, this just became personal. Those two were going to suffer for what they had done. And so the entire group set off for the last known location of Hidan and Kakazu, and with their Kurama chakra modes, I'm not afraid to tell you that they stomped those two into oblivion. The only one to survive was Hidan, who had some sort of reliant immortality on some demonic being he had made a pact with. Instead, they had his mind emptied by the Yamanaka clan head Inoichi, who took as much information as possible before turning it over to Shikamaru, who buried the cultist alive. With this information, they came to learn that a shinobi named Pain was the leader of the Akatsuki, and that he was based in Amagakure. And so Minato began formulating a plan, and began gathering forces. The best shinobi he had in all of Konoha, as well as the best shinobi in all of Suna. The Sand and the Leaf began to formulate a plan. As they did, however, terror struck. Pain appeared within Konoha itself, his 6 paths relentlessly attacking its citizens. Jiraiya himself would have seen the Diva path and would recognize him immediately. Yahiko! As the battle was taking place, Jiraiya would rush to Minato and tell him about what was going on. He would tell Minato that Yahiko was the one attacking and that he possessed the Rinnegan eyes. Minato would tell him that all of the Akatsuki members attacking Konoha possessed Rinnegan eyes. Jiraiya would warn him about those eyes, and Itachi and the head of the Uchiha clan, Makoto, would fill him in on what the Rinnegan could actually do. Together they came up with a strategy. The Mangekyo unit would form up with a group of other powerful shinobi, and would take out each individual member of the 6 paths, while Minato himself and Jiraiya would team up against Pain. Minato agreed to this, and together with Jiraiya they'd rush into battle. Yahiko, stop this, Jiraiya would shout. This isn't who you are. You used to believe in peace, and now you're killing people? You carried a blunt sword, and now you're having people murdered. Stop this madness and come back, Yahiko. Pain would simply look at Jiraiya with a stoic expression. Yahiko is dead. All that remains is Pain. And so Jiraiya and Minato began to fight against Pain. Jiraiya utilized his Sage Mode for this, and Minato stacked his Sage Mode with his Kurama Chakra Mode. They're not playing games here. Neither of these two were doing this for sport or to see who wins in a fun setting. No. Pain messed around, and he has to find out. Pain gets absolutely ragdolled, as do his other 6 paths, and once this is done, they realize the truth of what was said. Yahiko was dead, in that he was actually dead. His body was being controlled by chakra rods, as were the others. Jiraiya came to realize the truth that Nagato was the one behind this, as the only legitimate Rinnegan in this battle had to have been Nagato. They would track him back to the forest where the papier-mâché tree Konan had made served as a conduit for Nagato's power, as well as a disguise to keep them from sight. As soon as Jiraiya walked in, though, everyone's defenses rose. Konan was ready to fight, but Nagato knew it was no use. If they could beat his 6 paths, then Konan had no chance. Jiraiya, though, showed no violent intent. Instead, he drew closer, slowly, looking at the shell of the man he had once known. Nagato, what happened to you? Nagato sat there silently, his body broken, carried around by a strange contraption that served as a traveling life support. The world happened to me. Jiraiya drew closer and looked at the machine. I thought you were killed. Nagato looked at his old master. I was. I, Nagato, and Konan, and our little peacekeeping group that we named after the rising sun, the hope of tomorrow, an escape from the shinobi world's darkness. We attempted to bring peace to the world by fighting against corruption like our own hero, Hanzo. But we were betrayed. Our beliefs in who he was dashed. Because of him, Yahiko died, and I was wounded beyond repair. It was then that I realized how naive we had been. We believed that we could bring peace through peace. How wrong I was. The only thing people understand is violence, and the only way to bring peace was through force, and so that's what I wanted to do in spades. And we're still doing so. You won't be able to stop us. Jiraiya shook his head. No, stop this. Leave the world alone. You're just going to get people killed, Nagato. Nagato shook his head. No, I am finished, but what I started will continue on. He will finish what I started. And with that, Nagato cut his own wrists and died. Konan looked at Jiraiya. You lied to us when you said that we could bring peace through peace. You lied. You should have let the Snake Man just kill us. If you had, maybe this pain wouldn't be upon you. Pacifism brings pain. Only pain brings peace. Konan then cut her wrists as well and died there in front of Jiraiya. Jiraiya fell to his knees. Where did I go wrong? I loved them. I just wanted them to live happy and healthy lives. Minato walked over to Jiraiya. You did nothing wrong. They made their own choices and their own decisions, and their decisions were what they would have chosen regardless of you. You're not to blame. They are. All we can do now is stop their plots. I'm going back to Konoha. I need to contact the other villages and let them know what's happening. And so Minato did. And during this conversation, he came to realize that the other nations had kept silent. They didn't tell him that most of their tailed beasts had already been taken. Minato was furious, but he kept his cool. He told them that they needed to meet in person and form a true coalition to deal with this, and they agreed. And so Minato would go off to the 5 Kage summit held in the Land of Iron, and there he would discuss what to do next, what the coalition's goals were, and who would lead them. Despite everything, the truth was Minato was the only one here worthy of it. He was forthcoming, and he had also been the only one to take action against the Akatsuki and was responsible for beheading the organization, so that was without dispute. However, as they discussed these things, a mysterious masked man that Minato knew all too well appeared. "It seems as if we've been in this situation before," the masked man said with a hint of smile in his voice. Minato looked back. "You." Minato was out of his seat immediately, and he tried to attack the man, but once more he passed through him entirely. "Minato, really? Have you remembered nothing since our last tussle? You can't hit me. You're simply not fast enough. But then again, Yellow Flash, since when have you ever not been late?" Minato stood there. The man sighed. "Now, let me get back to what I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted. I need the remaining tailed beasts. I have 7 of 9. If you give me the last 2, I can promise a peaceful world without a bloodbath. However, if you refuse, I'll destroy everything that stands in my way." Let's just say that this didn't go over so well. The Raikage splintered the table with his fist and raged at the idea that Kuma would ever bow to a single man, no matter how many pets he had. Minato too refused to give in, and so this led to the mysterious man declaring the 4th Shinobi World War. The 5 Kage discussed this and moved on to their next planned moves. After this, Minato would return home to gather forces. Some had considered having Naruto sent far away from the war, but Minato decided to leave this up to his son, who wanted to go to war with Minato. Minato respected this decision. After all, it would serve no purpose to exclude him, as Minato himself needed to be in the war, and he had the 9 tails as well, so either way, Konoha's beast was exposed. But so long as Kumo kept theirs protected, everything would be okay. And so, as the day came to begin marching, they did. Unbeknownst to them, however, the Akatsuki had an army of strange monsters, known as Zetsu, that they had to fight against. And these Zetsu were then led by generals who were undead resurrections of previous legendary shinobi. However, Konoha was not unprepared. They still had Orochimaru under their control, and Orochimaru would give them the hand signs to free the Edo Tensei. Upon activating it, the Edo Tensei would be returned to the afterlife. This allowed the allied shinobi forces to advance towards the Gedo statue. Much to their terror, however, Toby had claimed part of the 8 tails, as well as part of the 9 tails via the Gold and Silver brothers. With that, the 10 tails was active, and would be absorbed by the masked man, who would then be revealed to be Obito Uchiha. Minato's face turned pale at this. "Obito, how could you?" Obito smiled at him. "You saw the 3rd Shinobi World War. I am what the world made me." Minato shook his head. "This isn't you, Obito." Obito shook his back. "No, Minato. This is me. This is the me you've allowed me to become. You were too late to save me, too slow. Then you weren't even there to save Rin. It's a surprise Kakashi even survived being your student." The two argued with each other, only for Minato to conclude that there was no saving him. And frankly, he didn't want to. Obito had been loved and cared for, and yet he'd betrayed that. Kushina had treated him like the son she always wanted, and she was killed by him. The Obito Minato knew was now dead. And what was left was something that Minato gagged looking at. He bore his kunai, activated his Mangekyo, cloaked them in Amaterasu's black flames, and then activated both Sage Mode and Kurama Chakra Mode. He rushed at Minato and struck out at him. Obito would utilize his Kamui to avoid taking damage from the Amaterasu. "You're just too slow." Obito would grip Minato's hand to keep him from using that kunai on him. He would squeeze, breaking Minato's hand before pushing him away. Kurama would flow chakra to the injury to heal it. Naruto would then rush up next to him. "Let me help you, Dad." Minato looked at Naruto and nodded. The two of them would fist bump and together would rush Obito. As they struck out at him, he would skillfully block both and push them away. "Too slow, too weak. The moon is rising, boys. You'd better think of something quickly." The two would then grab hands as they would create a massive avatar out of Kurama's chakra. Obito would split his staff in two and rush forward through the chakra avatar and pierce both Minato and Naruto, throwing them to the ground. As they hit ground, Minato looked down to his chest and saw the rod sticking out of it. He looked over to see Naruto, panicking. He reached out for his son. Naruto had fear in his eyes. He reached out weakly before his eyes closed and he fell unconscious. Minato was close behind. There he found himself in darkness. When he raised his eyes, he saw the eyes of Fugaku looking back at him. Fugaku smiled. "Looks like you're having a rough time with one of my clan members." Minato nodded. "I'm not sure what to do." Fugaku laughed. "Don't you worry, I have an idea. While I work on that, there's someone else here you should talk to. The remnants of some chakra left behind." He pointed over. Minato followed the direction of his finger and saw Kushina standing there. Minato stood up and ran over to hug her. "Kushina, I missed you so much." She giggled. "I missed you too, my love." Minato began to cry. "It's been hell without you." She sighed as if he had just said the most misguided thing. "Baby, I want you to be happy. I love you and I know you love me. That's not going to change. Nothing can stop our love, even distance and spiritual planes." Minato wiped his tears. He then remembered. "Naruto! He's been stabbed." Kushina put her hands on Minato's chest to calm him. "It's okay. He'll be okay. The same power allowing Fugaku to talk to you is working with him. Naruto is more special than you know. He'll be fine." Minato stood there with her and the two spoke about Obito. Kushina told Minato it was okay. "It's fine, Minato. I forgive him. But we can't let him do this. I need you to defeat him. Give Naruto an opening and finish it as soon as you have the chance." Minato nodded. "I will." A tear ran down his cheek. "Will I ever see you again?" She wiped his tear and smiled. "Of course. You just have to wait. Now, go be my hero once again." She kissed him. And as she did so, Minato awakened. In his eyes, both of Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan flared to life. He stood as a magenta flame surrounded him. He looked over and saw Naruto standing as well, his own form having shifted. A perfect sage mode, and he even possessed the same Truth Seeker orbs that Obito did. Minato then fist bumped Naruto once more, as Minato would take the form of Kurama before covering it in the magenta armor of Susanoo. He would coat the weapons he used in Amaterasu. He remembered what Kushina had said to him, wondering if she had said the same thing to Naruto. Together they rushed at Obito. Despite everything, Obito claimed Minato to still be too slow, and Minato knew it to be true. So he decided to break out a technique he'd been studying for quite some time. He would lower his mass while increasing his speed. The same technique that took Fugaku's life. He would use it to make sure that he was never too slow ever again, and with it he managed to get a few lucky hits in. With Obito off kilter, Naruto rushed in and touched him with the seals on his hands, sealing him and the Ten Tails away in a massive Chibaku Tensei that they sent off into space. And with that, the war came to a close, each of the tailed beasts freed from Obito as the seal took hold. From this, peace reigned. A mutual respect for each other budded among the many nations and Kage. And due to this, the peace that Nagato and Obito had hoped for was upon the world, even if it wasn't in the way they had expected it. And with the passing of years, Minato knew his time to retire was near, so he would proceed to pass on the title of Hokage to his son, Naruto, who would become known as the 5th Hokage. And that's where I'm gonna call it quits for now. I hope you enjoyed the story. I certainly did. Writing stories about Minato always ensures things will be epic. If you enjoyed the story, tell us about it in the comments below, and feel free to recommend more video ideas as well. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when we drop more content like this. Also, check out one of these videos here. Until next time, peace out.